So welcome everyone to the 2021 QULOC University Librarians Forum, which is being held virtually for the second year now. Please be aware that we are recording this session and the recording will be made available on the QULOC website in the near future. So I'd like to start by acknowledging the Kombumerri people upon whose ancestral lands Bond University stands and pay respect to their ongoing custodianship of the land and waters. I invite you to use the chat facility now to make your own acknowledgements of traditional owners from the lands where you are currently situated. So the first item on the program today is an update on QULOC activities. So just briefly, the big news this year was that QULOC became an ALIA group. This decision was made by the university librarians so that QULOC could tap into the administrative and legal support that ALIA can provide to us. But it really hasn't changed our structure or general operation in any way. It hasn't changed the way QULOC thinks or sees itself, and people can interact with QULOC in the same way as they could previously. Our activities have been somewhat constrained over the past 20 months or so, as I'm sure you're all aware, but for the most part, the working parties and groups have continued to meet virtually and share information and ideas. We're all very hopeful that the new year will bring new freedoms and the ability to choose more varied modes of interaction. But I also think that we've learned that virtual opportunities can be more inclusive. So I think we'll see that as an option in all QULOC activities moving forward. The other news I wanted to share with you was that Chelsea Harper, the Associate Director of Library and Archives at the University of the Sunshine Coast, will be taking over as convener of QULOC for the next 2 years. So I will hand over to Chelsea at the end of the program for a wrap up of today's session. So I would like to say my sincere thanks in advance to all the presenters and facilitators today for all the work you've put into preparing for today and for sharing your experience and knowledge with us. I'd also like to give a huge thanks to Sarah Howard from QUT for managing the technological side for us. So please enjoy the presentations. Ask any questions you have through the chat facility and we'll get to as many of them as we can. And if you'd like to engage in the conversation, you can use the hashtag ULForum21. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce the first session, which is a university librarian panel on the topic One Library, One Team, Blueprint or Band-Aid for the Uncertain Future. The facilitator is Bronwyn Matheson, Associate Director, Information and Research Services at James Cook University. So I'll hand over to you, Bronwyn. Over to you, Bronwyn.
Oh, thank you so much, Sarah. Sorry for that hiccup. So I'd just like to say Wadamuli, which is hello and welcome from Bindal country, where I'm coming from today. My name's Bron Matheson, and joining me on the panel today is Griffith University's University Librarian, Maureen Sullivan, Director of Library Services at Charles Darwin University, Anthony Hornby, and Claire Thorpe, Director of Library Services at Southern Cross University. So thank you all for coming. Today, our hashtag is ULForum21. So please join the debate on the socials if you'd like to and add your comments and join in the conversation. So to start off with, our first question for Maureen. So Maureen, a one library, one team model, why have one now?
Okay, thank you, Bronwyn. And hello, everyone. I'm coming to you from Nathan campus of Griffith University on the land of the Yagara and the Turrbal people. So I'm pretty passionate about the one library, one team idea. One Library is actually part of the Griffith Libraries service approach, which is a deliberate, considered development, design and review framework for everything that we do. And it has 4 key principles. The first one and main one is that we are one library and we work as one team. And this is because our students and our clients do not care which section we work in or what level we are. They just care about how we can help them. The second principle is that we are user-centred and we try to understand and deliver content that is accessible and intuitive to our users, not from our perspective. The third principle is that we have flexible design and delivery. So we develop and make our services and our resources available as they're needed by our users in the channels that best suit them. And our last one is that we're evidence-based. So we're always using our expertise and experience along with data and user-focused information to make sure that we're doing the right thing. So this is our service approach, and the underlying one is the One Library concept. And it's been developed over time and was formally in place from about 2018, but it's really come into its own in COVID and 2020 on many different levels. We were able to build on these principles and see them in action, so we had to deliver them fast and be impactful in how we delivered them. And it demonstrated the value of embedding them into everything that we do. So the principles also feed into an evolving and maturing understanding of our service relationships, which fall into two broad categories, and that's our support and also our engagement and development. So they're the two different channels. Our services are, of course, delivered via digital and physical channels, and components of the service delivery rest on that one library, one team approach, in that we have an end-to-end approach to all of our processes. And especially it's strong and important in that area where we hand over the intersections between the things that we do. And so those handovers are smooth and professional. Our services are often increasingly delivered by different teams or by different staff in different teams, in sequence, jointly, or interwoven. And our aim is always that they're seamless and integrated, they're accurate, they're expert, and from all staff, regardless of what entry point the user comes into. And so the One Library for us is that we all own the library brand and we all own the library reputation, and we all contribute to it with every transaction and every interaction that we do. So driven by the COVID context and our reputation as the heart and help of the university, it was put to the test, and we had to move faster, work differently, take more risks, and have more targeted solutions. And we learned a lot more about the skills, knowledge, capacity, and creativity of all of our staff. So the university expected more from us, and our students and our academics needed more. And the result was a better recognition and appreciation of our combined and often not strictly traditional library powers. So things like our digital skills, our responsiveness, that was a big thing. We were so much more responsive than a lot of areas. And we became problem solvers. We built bridges and we bridged gaps without throwing things over the fence. So the university came to rely on the library for good, robust, proactive responses and to deliver what was needed with no fuss. And we could do that because it was one team, one library, not divided. So the constraints of COVID were an impetus to accelerate, and now we have to move from that theory into practice. As well as all of the changes that COVID brought in terms of teaching and dealing with students, we also had a reduction in our overall staffing profile of 20 staff who took VERs, over 400 years of Griffith library experience, and many more of just general library experience. We also took on Tier 1 face-to-face support for all of the Student Connect queries. We had new service offerings in our research area and greater participation requests and involvement in our learning and teaching sphere. So now we want to move more from implementing to adopting and embracing this one library in everything that we do. And why do I think this is important? It's important because it's the best thing for our students and the community that we serve, because it allows us to deliver strategic outputs with less, because it respects and values the contributions of all of our staff. And lastly, and I think importantly, because it provides us individually and as a community of librarians and library staff, the backup and safety of all of us. So we're one library working together to deliver. So that's why one library, one team is a really powerful mantra for me and something that we will be continuing to deliver. Thanks, Bron.
Thanks, Maureen. Now I'd like to go over to Anthony and ask, how does your team work differently in a one library, one team model?
Okay, can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Good? Okay. I'd just like to say that, so hi everyone, I'd just like to say thanks to Maureen. She's covered a really great set of things that we've done, we sort of think about as well. So there's sort of service principles and values flowing down for us from the strategic plan through to our portfolio and then through to us. And they're very much about service centric, being students first and understanding how we maximise the experience for students across the university end to end. And so for us, this has been a bit of a challenge because we also went through a restructure in 2019, or we went through a restructure in 2019. We had a reduction in staff numbers, and then we had a second restructure in 2020 where we gained responsibility for learning and language services. And while those changes were difficult and disruptive, they've also provided some real opportunities to think differently. And so when we went live post restructure, we did a lot of work with our staff to have conversations with everyone and communicate that this was a new day and that in this new environment, we're one library, and that meant we would be open and transparent first, that we will be a safe space where everyone could be an active leader for change and improvement, and that we demonstrate how much we care about something by how willing we are to act and have skin in the game. So what's that actually mean in practice? It means understanding, as Maureen touched on, that all of our services affect our staff and students, and no services stand alone. It means it's the sum of the parts that actually makes a great experience for staff and students. It's not any one part of that journey. And so that's not a problem that any team in the library can solve by themselves. It's not a problem that the library can solve by itself. It's something where we all have to be in it together and understanding how we can fix it or how we can make it better. So when I think of one library, I think of it as kind of a subset of one portfolio, one university, and in some ways one sector. So it's a culture and a way of doing things that I hope we can develop at CDU, as I feel it maximises our chance to have impact around improvement. And in practice, I see it through three lenses. The first one is building openness. So keeping everything open wherever possible to maximise those opportunities to work together. And so for us, that's been things like virtual teams around functions that span campuses, internal communication channels and information management sites that are grouped around functions, not around teams, dramatically reducing the number of permission sets and restrictions, and having everything as open and shareable wherever possible, both at the library, portfolio and university level, having shared staff development opportunities within the library, but also across the portfolio and across the university. The second one's about awareness of our values. So being one library or being one portfolio doesn't just mean jumping in anywhere willy-nilly. It means really understanding what you're going into, what success looks like for us, and what we think we bring to the table. And so it's looking for it's actively seeking those opportunities to contribute across teams, across the university and across the sector to influence or directly improve outcomes. And I'd say that since our go live, we've had many examples of staff who've led that by example. They've grabbed something, they've seen an area of improvement, they've run with that idea to completion, and over a month, 6 months, a year, all those things add up to a whole lot of improvement. And we've seen that, since the change process, that a whole number of issues that hung around for years have just gone away. And that's great. They've been solved, they've been resolved because people have been able to move quickly and to work together to nut these things out. It also means we have more seats at the table at CDU, both in traditional areas, but also in less traditional areas. Things like developing the university's response and approach to business continuity as a whole university. So the library is key in that now, because we've got things that we can bring to the table that are valued. So I think the scope for libraries, library staff and libraries to have positive change is really broad, and we bring a unique perspective and a set of skills, partly because we're present in so many parts of staff and student journeys at universities. And we should use that, we should use that to drive improvement and change. The third and the most important thing to me is the right culture and mindset. And I really think that everything else flows from having the right culture and the right mindset. And so the way I think about that, the way I think about One Library in terms of culture and mindset is, it means to me being present and engaged in all environments that you're in to solve problems together. So I think of One Library to mean where I am now in this moment is my team. And I think it's a really simple and a really powerful idea. And it means that, in our day-to-day work, in project teams, in teams that we're in with colleges, in leadership teams, in committees or other groups, both within and across the university or the sector, that we understand that when we're working with others, that those people we're working with are our team, and that we're present and active to solve problems together in that environment. And so we're not just present as representatives of our work area or our individual function, and only listening out for those topics that we think are relevant to our environments. And to me, that's really empowering. And personally, it's really changed how I've engaged with others. I think it gives me license to be curious beyond what I know. I think it gives me license to apply my skills fully and to be present and to contribute in all aspects. I think it's really empowering and really liberating. So I would say I have many teams. I have my immediate work area is my team, my project team is my team, my leadership is my team. You get the idea. And that's a culture that we're trying to build across the library. And I would also say that evolving culture is something you can't force. It's something that needs to be active and present every day. It's something that has to be nurtured and grow. And it has to be something that we all genuinely want and believe in. And there's a quote, I think I'll finish with very quickly, that I think is relevant here. And it's a quote from an author, and it says, "If you want to build a ship, don't drum up the people to gather wood, divide the work and give orders. Instead, teach them to yearn for the vast and endless sea." So it's everybody having that understanding that we all need to be in things together to actually make real impactful improvement at universities. But we also have to understand where we should be present. What does that look like for us, and what do we bring to the table? So that's me.
Thanks, Anthony. Claire, I'm really interested in your view. Do you think that a One Library model could devalue professional expertise that our staff bring? Does it make us all generalists?
It's a really interesting question, Bron. And I guess I feel like I started my career in libraries as a generalist, working on the reference desk at Griffith Gold Coast Library. And I feel like along the way, over the past 20 years, I've developed a couple of specialty areas. But as the director of the library, I actually need to be a generalist again. I need to know all aspects of the library's business, and that's where my expertise is most valued, because I know all of the parts of the business, hopefully to a reasonably good level. And I think that's the perception that our clients have of us. So they see someone who works in the library, and they expect us to be able to represent all parts of the library and to be able to connect them to the right part of the library that they need to be connected to. And I think that's what really empowers a One Library, One Team model, because it's not about the library. I think Anthony and Maureen have already both said, it is about the staff and the students that we empower. It's about how we work alongside them to empower them on their journey to success. And that's something that every single person in my library team contributes to. And to echo Maureen and Anthony, I don't think it's about devaluing expertise, but rather it's about abolishing the silos that kept us tightly hidden away in our professional or specialist silos, perhaps. So what I like about One Library models is that we break down those silos and we reduce those single points of failure. So I arrived at Southern Cross University in July, and they put in place a one library model a few months prior. And what I've learned about that model that they put in place, and what I was really excited about, was to see the role that every person in the library, regardless of their hue level or their job title or their functional responsibility, every person was contributing to the library's experience. And they were all collaborating and contributing to the university's business and the university's strategic priorities. And I think that's what I value. I value that expertise and that commitment to the work that we do within our universities. Just over the last week, I've actually been talking to our teams about the focus areas where I want to see us invest in over the next year or two. And as I've been sharing the 4 focus areas and I guess my sense making that I've done since arriving at Southern Cross, it's been really clear that regardless of whether we're talking about refreshing our collections or improving our systems and business processes, or we're partnering with the learning and teaching experience, every single person in the library contributes to all 4 focus areas that we're going to look at over the next couple of years. So I need a whole range of different types of expertise, but I need them all together, not separately. Thanks, Bron.
Oh, thank you, Claire. So I have a question from the audience. So for the panel, does a one library model mean library staff will be doing everybody else's job too? Anthony, perhaps?
So I think it's a really easy thing to say, but I think you have to unpack what that actually means. And so going to what Claire was just saying and what Maureen said, and also what I've covered, is that really services and experiences for staff and students don't stand by themselves. And so you really have to understand what it looks like end to end. And it's really rarely going to be the case that there's one little piece of discrete work that just fits within your team that's going to truly be impactful in terms of that experience. And so the way I think about it is it's about, if we really want to improve services for clients, if we really want to make it better, then we need to be willing to contribute wherever we can to improve that overall process. And so it's about being as impactful as we can to deliver what we actually want in the first place, which is that great experience. It also doesn't mean jumping in and accepting everything willy-nilly either. It needs to be aligned with where we understand we bring something to the table that's unique and valuable, and where that fits within our kind of strategy, both at the local level and at the university level. So for me, it's not about doing other people's work. It's about working with other people to do our work better.
Thanks, Anthony. So Maureen, would you like to comment?
Yes, I would actually. I just noticed there's on the chat, so it's like the old saying, jack of all trades, master of none. No, I don't think it is. I think actually we tend to forget what the librarian superpower is, and it is that we actually understand information. We can analyse questions, we can analyse information and data. Those of us old enough to remember the reference interview is everything that we do. So I don't think it is about being losing skills. I think it's actually about understanding and honing those skills that we do have, and being able to refer and connect people to either resources or other people. And it's about, to me, it's about the seamlessness, and it's about the experience that we can give our students. And that experience is there is no stupid question. Everyone is welcome. Inclusion. We're here for your success. And I think that's really, for us, why I think it actually works. Thanks.
Well, thank you, Maureen. Now, if we could move on, I have a question from Susan Bolton in the audience.
Hi there, yes. Maureen, you mentioned that you have to do more with less. Aren't you just trying to make the best of a bad situation?
Well, honestly, the need to do more with less was definitely a driver. Absolutely, cannot disagree. We had less staff and we had growing demand. And we had growing demand because we do an excellent job. So it's not, someone once told me when I complained about workload, demand is not necessarily a bad thing, Maureen. No demand is more of a worry. So I've always put that in my back pocket. But what it did mean was that we do need to harness our resources better. And it certainly focused the mind, the fact that, you know, we did have to do more with less, but we were already on that road. And I don't believe that just adding dollars or more staff always delivers a better outcome. It's an attractive idea just to add water or dollars and hey presto, your problems are solved. And our One Library, One Team predates COVID very much. The reality is we have 5 campuses. We have 6 libraries on those 5 campuses. We have a lot of open and service hours and a limited number of staff. So we need to deploy our staff and our resources smartly. But at the same time, we have to manage staff wellbeing and we have to nurture their development. And I really believe that thinking about things as Anthony has described, being present and active and understanding how you can contribute to whatever team you're in is such a strong value and skill for all of our staff to develop. That will be a wonderful thing for their careers.
Can I jump in on that one, Bron? Because I bang on a bit at my place about sustainable and scalable workloads. I have a really, really tiny team, probably not quite as small as Anthony's, but we're small institutions and we have to be able to do more with less, but we have to do it, like Maureen said, in a way that supports the well-being of ourselves and of the people that we work with. And so it is about using the tools and resources that we've got to work in good ways. But we do have to be really smart about it. And it's really hard, and it only works if we aren't in silos and if we are working in the team that we're in at that moment and being really focused on what it is we're here for.
If I just saw that there's a question in the chat around business continuity, and I think it's relevant to this discussion. And so it's about, you know, what did we bring to the table that was valued? One of the things that we brought to the table is now a business continuity and care plan, because actually we do care about students and we care about staff. And so, you know, it's not just about systems and things ticking away and not falling over. It's about the impact that that actually has on people's lives. So we brought that. We brought the fact that we genuinely care about our staff and students. We also brought the fact that we understand how people learn. And so when I was presented with the first kind of approach around business continuity, I knew that that was going to be really hard for people to use and implement. It just didn't make sense. And so we brought that understanding of how people learn and how they develop skills. And lastly, we brought sensibleness, which is the way that my DVC brought it, you know, practical, logical, structured thinking stuff through. So those are all things that come from the library that we've been able to apply successfully in that environment.
Thanks, Anthony. Soon we'll go to Rebecca for some further chat questions. But before that, I've got a question from Bruce Munro in the audience.
Thanks, Bron. And to the panel, thank you for your insight on this topic as well. It sounds like we're trending away from embedded librarianship, where staff had that deep subject knowledge, to a model where librarians have less subject expertise and discipline knowledge. So how do we ensure that we still have that expertise to support students and academics in the wide range of disciplines at our universities?
Can I throw to you, Claire?
Sure. To be honest, I think in 2021, the idea of having an embedded librarian in a school is probably past its use by date, because I think it leads us into situations of single points of failure. So if we have a single law librarian or a single business librarian, as soon as that person goes on holiday, everything grinds to a halt potentially. Now, I know that's probably not happens in real life, but that's the perception. And I think it also fosters, in some ways, learned helplessness amongst the people that we're working with in the schools. I do value the relationships. I don't want to say that the way that we work with our staff and students across the university shouldn't be based in the good parts of embedded librarianship, which is about the relationships. But I do think there are other ways of doing it, and I think there are really good models at other universities around the country which have moved to more of a team-based approach to liaison, which values the relationships but doesn't encourage those single points of failure. And there's some fantastic examples at University of South Australia. Wollongong have got a model like this as well. And one of the things I worry about with embedded librarianships is that it can potentially be seen as a support model. We're here to support you. I don't think libraries support. I think we empower, and I think we are partners. I'm an expert in my discipline. My discipline is librarianship. And so I bring a whole lot of expertise to partner with academics for teaching, learning, and research. I'm not here to support them. I'm not a servant. I'm an equal. And I think that's something we need to own more of. And we need to be in those spaces where the decisions are being made to work alongside and collaborate and partner and empower and bring that language to the work that we're doing as a One Library team.
Thanks, Claire. Maureen, did you have any comment there?
I strongly agree with Claire on all of those points. I think, though, in particular, for a university like Griffith, which is a multidisciplinary university, we cover all sorts of things, and increasingly disciplines are working together on the big problems and the big concerns of the world. So climate change is not going to be solved just by scientists. All sorts of things require a whole lot of different disciplines to come together. And again, I think we are discipline experts in librarianship, and that librarianship is, and that expertise is around understanding information, making sense of information, connecting dots, doing all of those things that we do well. And so I see there are great benefits in not being in a pigeonhole. The other thing I would say too is that I think becoming a one discipline wonder is not a great thing for one's career. It depends on what you're looking for, but again, it's putting yourself into a smaller and smaller shoebox. And I think what we want to do is we want to look for as many opportunities as possible and think of our librarian skills as transferable skills into many different things that may not even be in the library.
Well, very interesting. Thanks, Maureen. Finally, I'd like to check in with Rebecca on the chat thread if we've got some questions to bring in. Thanks.
Yep, we just got one question here from Debbie Howarth. So what can you let go of to meet growing demand but have less resources to do so?
I'll have a stab. Look, that's really hard. I think the actual answer is in what Claire said earlier. We are not support, we are partners. And if we're partnering, we are doing things in a different way. And I think a lot of the work that we get bogged down in is us filling what I call putting our fingers in someone else, in the dike that someone else has sprung a leak in. And I think that's happening more and more with COVID, post-COVID, where there's been a whole lot of changes and decisions made at a high level about what will be important to an organisation, but the processes haven't changed underneath. And because we are nice people, and because we are very organised people, and because people know where to find us in the library, we can fall into the trap of filling those things. But I think it's around thinking about what are the key things that we can do that make a difference, that deliver on the priorities of our organisation. And there are some key things that we are the experts in. Yes, we can help with a whole lot of other things, but we shouldn't be doing people's admin and we shouldn't be holding people's hands. That's easier said than done though, Debbie.
Thanks, Maureen. I think we'll have to begin to close, but if I could ask one last question of the panel, if you each had to sum up the concept one library, one team in 3 words, what would you say? Claire?
I think one library models have the potential to be very successful. I think they could actually be quite empowering, not just for ourselves as professional library staff, but also for our universities. And I think they are partnership models. It's about us partnering across our teams in the library, across our functional areas and our roles, but also partnering outside the library and having that outward-looking focus. So for me, it's successful, empowering, partnering.
Thanks, Claire. Maureen?
Sorry, my screen's really large. I was going to say living our values, but I really want to yearn for the sea from Anthony's quote. I just love that quote, and I think that's a really good thing for us to think about, putting our head above the day-to-day and working on the future. And so yearn for the sea, it's 4 words, sorry.
Oh, they're beautiful though, thanks, Maureen. Anthony, finally to you.
Gee, that's a tough act to follow. Look, I had connected and empowered and valued, but I guess it's putting that all in context. It's really about that valued in partnership, you know, and where do we maximise our impact? So how do we do the most we can to make students and staff successful? And that's not by ourselves, that's in partnership with others, and it's thinking about all the spheres of influence we have and being as present as we can in all of them. And that's nothing like 3 words, so sorry.
That's all right. No, thanks so much to all the panel and to everybody who participated. We'll be handing back to Sarah, but perhaps this conversation could carry on Twitter, perhaps with that UL Forum 21 hashtag. So thanks very much, and back to you, Sarah.
Thanks, Bron, and thanks to Maureen, Anthony, Claire, and your assistance with the questions. That was fantastic. So our next session is on the topic of hybrid online learning, and our presenter is Susan Lafferty, who is the Acting Director of Libraries at the Australian Catholic University. Welcome, Susan. Over to you.
Thank you. I'm just starting my video. There we go. I'm just getting myself ready here. So I was asked to speak about hybrid online learning. I've replaced Fetus Lawton on QULOC, and so this is my first attempt at a QULOC presentation. I decided that I wanted to think about hybrid in a broader way, but I was asked to talk about ensuring that our resources and spaces can support student learning in multiple modes, provide equivalency in library experience for remote and local students, and to ensure that engagement with educators doesn't decline. And so I'm talking about hybrid, blended, and online learning rather than just hybrid. Hybrid learning is teaching method where teachers instruct in-person and remote students at the same time, and there might be other offline things that also happen, whereas blended learning combines in-person teaching with asynchronous learning methods, where students work on online exercises and watch videos, for example, in their own time. And fully online, well, that's students who are fully online. My question is, are they really fully online? And a lot of what I'm saying today are questions. If they're fully online, do we provide them with print resources if they want them? If they're fully online, do they use our physical library spaces, or do we need to provide online library spaces? So what assumptions are we making? And that's a key question. What assumptions are we making about our students, our spaces, our pedagogy, our resources, and our educators? They're all good questions, and I'm just posing them. I'm not answering them. So hybrid learning and libraries. Should we be engaging in hybrid delivery of library instruction, for example? And are we set up for this? If we're going to do that kind of thing, should we be changing our infrastructure? Should we be using campus teaching spaces that are already set up for hybrid learning? Or should we aim to provide everything online, pre-recorded? My experience of trying to do that is that the minute you post it online, it's out of date. The screenshots change. Something else changes. The resources that people use change. So there's risk around that as well. Do we aim for separate face-to-face sessions and separate online delivery? And if we're doing that, how do we manage equivalence? Do our online students never meet a library staff member, for example? My sister started a university course a few years ago, several years ago now, and somehow she never got introduced to the library. And she spent her first year at university buying every resource that was listed in her reading list. She didn't know about the library. If we have online students who never find out about the library, we can't provide them an equivalent service. So how do we make sure that they do find out about the library and that they use our resources, our services, our expertise to the best of their ability and the best of our ability? Or do we split our offerings? Do we have face-to-face sessions for information and information education, but have something that's a follow-up where students do problem-based and independent work and perhaps then come back to us to see how they're going? And if we do that, if we did have something that was ongoing, we could have engagement with them over time because they've been to our sessions, they've gone off and they've done some of the work themselves, and then there's a follow-up so that they've had time to build in self-reflection and they can assess their own experience and knowledge, and then they can come back and perhaps there's a further step where we help them to understand if they've really picked it up or whether they need a bit more help. And I think engagement, if we're going to be doing hybrid, online, blended learning, we need to have some kind of follow-up rather than just setting them adrift on that sea. And the only way we can really do that, I believe, is to engage with the educators. Because one of the things that I really don't like is when we decide we know what's best for everybody and we go off and do it, and then it's perhaps not particularly relevant. So this is my first statement, that we need to engage with our educators if we're going to engage with our students. I went off and looked at some research about the student experience of hybrid online learning. And you can always find a piece of research that will suit exactly the point you're trying to make. Some students during COVID, for example, missed the dialogue that occurs in the classroom. And even though they might have had reasonable marks. Their marks didn't drop. They engaged less with the learning experience. They engaged less with the fellow students. I found research where the students stated that they hated passively listening to what's happening on a screen with no engagement at all. I found other research where these were biology students who preferred online instruction and wanted nothing to do with anything else. And this was actually about library instruction. They preferred online. So another question I have is, if we're looking at hybrid, online, blended, and the services and resources that we offer, do we need to be discipline specific? And if we need to be discipline specific, then there's those educators again. There was another study that I looked at, and this was a small cohort of women. It was very interesting. And they liked the online videos. They particularly liked videos to watch. My question is, if the library is going to do videos, how do we manage quality? Because I also know that there are library staff who love to make videos, but they very often look homegrown. This particular group also wanted social media and ongoing conversations and email. They wanted to collaborate in their library instruction, even though they were online. And this one, again, in this study, there was that follow-up. So they did the library instruction, they talked among themselves, they collaborated on what they were doing, and then there was a post-instruction test or survey. And so there was a follow-up for them to understand whether they had actually gotten it. So again, we can't afford to do any of this without talking to our educators. Otherwise, we might be teaching one thing and the educators are actually looking for something else. Okay, so if we move on to library spaces, are we even in a position to provide hybrid library spaces? And do we need to? If people are working in a hybrid or an online method, do they actually want our physical spaces? McGill University at some point did a survey of what people wanted from their library because they were trying to reimagine their library. 81% of the students wanted to use the library space for work or study. 1% came to the library to speak to a librarian. So if we want to be where the students are, or we want to provide space for the students, how do we even think about a hybrid space for them? And is this something they can actually do on their own? Because they've got Zoom, they've got FaceTime, they've got different ways of collaborating, doing group work if they need an online space. And if they're doing individual study, they've either coming to the library or they've got their own space. My question is, do they have their own space? Should we be trying to do something in that area? And then I started thinking about resources. You'd think resources would be simple. It's hybrid, it's online, it's blended. So we'll just make all the resources electronic and available online. Not a problem. But then we have our educators setting textbooks where we only have 3 user licenses or 6 or 9 user licenses. And our students need access to this. So it's not as simple as all that. I really think that now is the time for us all to be working together on open education resources. If we're going to be doing more and more online, we can't be limited by somebody else's view of how a library should operate or how we should lend our books. I'd really like to see all of us beginning to collaborate on open education resources and providing all of our students across the board with online resources that have no limitations. Okay, we're hybrid. What do we do about our print resources? Do we digitize? Do we scan? Do we email? Do we tell them that they're just online and therefore they don't get the print resources? Or even if they are online, do they need to come to the library to get the print resources? So again, we come back to engaging with the educators, because they're the ones that are telling our students what they need to access and what they need to read, what they need to view. So if we actually talk to our educators and work with them, we should be able to find a way to provide these blended and hybrid services without really destroying some aspect of what we do for students or for researchers. So again, talking to those people who actually create some of our work. And this is not something that necessarily libraries can address on our own, but we've got hybrid blended online. How do we provide an on and off campus experience that's the same? We have people who may not have the devices they need. They may have problems with internet connections. They may, as one of our, as our provost does when she's off campus, she's only got satellite connection, or they might be on the NBN, which is probably as bad as anything. So how do we provide equivalence when people don't necessarily have an equivalent access to us, the university, the library, and just us generally? But there are things that we can do to support equivalence. We can have online and face-to-face instruction. We can have chat, email, online and face-to-face consultations. They're ways that we can build equivalence. Although with the privacy issues that keep coming up, there's less and less chance for some of that as well. We're looking at chat and email at the moment, and the privacy requirements that are building up around that is quite difficult. But we need to think in everything that we're doing and however we're delivering, we need to be thinking about equivalence and equity. And engaging with the educators is the key to it all. So when we talk about, can we make sure that our collaboration with educators doesn't degrade, that is key to everything. Now, I wasn't asked to talk about sustainability. I know that trying to work with our educators across such a broad range of delivery is difficult, but that's where we still need to be. And at ACU, we've got, it's really quite exciting. We're moving to a product called ACU Online, and where the library is being involved very early with the educational designers in selecting the resources. It's all being done in a framework that means that the library comes in early. It provides its expertise and it helps in the selection really early on before the course is even designed and delivered. And I'm really looking forward to it because I think it's also an opportunity for us to really start using the full Leganto functionality. We've had it for a few years, but we're still not using it properly. And the wonderful thing about this is that the course designers are making sure that we all engage with the educators. And that's probably the most exciting thing about this, is that we're coming in on the ground floor. We're not at some later point looking at a course proposal and working out whether we've got the resources or not. We're right in at the ground floor. So it's that engagement again that is so exciting. So I would just rabbit on about engagement with educators, talk to the educators, be there with our teaching staff, and keep thinking about equivalence and equity. Thank you.
Thanks, Susan. That was very thought-provoking. I haven't seen any questions pop up in the chat at this stage, so I might ask a question. That sounds very exciting, being involved at the very beginning of the ACU online strategy. Are you planning to, and are you having any success in convincing your educators to use open educational resources as the main resources for those courses?
Well, this is actually being driven by the provost, who is very excited about open education resources. So we have a very, very good opportunity to start influencing that. It's very early stages. I think the first meeting I went to was about a week ago, but I popped up and said open education resources, and she said yes, yes, yes. So I think we will have this opportunity.
Great. And is ACU doing anything else with open education resources, perhaps other than getting involved in the CALL project?
At this stage, I'd say not. We're definitely I'm wanting to get involved in the CALL project, but I'm just going to claim that I haven't been in the role long enough to take us down that road, but I'm planning on it.
Excellent, thank you. Do any of the other panelists have questions that I'd like to ask Susan before we move on to the next session?
Oh, Kerry's just come in. Yes, of course, they are being used in short courses. Sorry, Kerry.
Caroline.
Oh, hi, Susan, and thank you for that. I'm just wondering whether you've got any further with thinking about any space redesign or new facilities in our library spaces as students come into library spaces to engage in online tutorials.
My thoughts around space at the moment are about how we can use them differently to engage, or so people can engage with information differently. I haven't thought about them so much coming in for online tutorials, but I would like to be freeing up space so that we can do things like yarning circles or more community engagement type things. I'd like to think, although I'm not sure that I have a lot of support in this area, but I'd like to think that we could do things around virtual reality or augmented reality to provide a space for people to engage with information in a way that they feel like they're there. We've got an archaeology course starting, and I'd really like to think that we could provide ways for people to do virtual tours of digs and things. But we will see. But I want us to start using space differently in a way that people can engage with information differently using those spaces.
Great, thank you. Now we've had a couple of questions pop up in the chat. So the first one, in the physical campus, the library is an important part of the university experience and the community connection for students. Can you see an online equivalent in your hybrid model?
I'm thinking. I would like to think that in the hybrid model, we would have ways for students to be engaging with each other. And I'd like to see that people are able to somehow collaborate. I think that if we can provide a collaborative library experience, even if it's just when we're doing instruction or follow-up, that would be a way for that kind of community connection to continue with our students. And I think if we're working with our teaching staff in working out what we will deliver in a hybrid environment to our students, then there should be a way for the library to be involved on an ongoing basis. And I told you I didn't have to think about sustainability, but I'd like to think that the library would have some ongoing role through several weeks that would help the library to be involved in that community engagement.
Great, thank you. And the last one's more of a comment than a question. Basically, the question is raised when students come in and approach the physical library counter, and they ask for a librarian, what does that mean to them? And perhaps communicating differently might help us to answer that. What do you think, Susan?
I suspect that any student who comes to the library and asks for a librarian thinks we all are librarians. Whoever is at that desk is probably a librarian. And I think too that the people who are at that desk, at that counter, can answer a lot of those questions, and that engenders confidence in the students so that they, if we're lucky, they come back and ask better questions where they really do want a librarian. But I think if you come to the counter and you ask for a librarian, the next question is, what would you like the librarian to be doing for you so that you can find out what they really want? I'd probably like to have a librarian at times to just look over my shoulder and help me. When you say communicate differently, I'm not sure what that means. But I think when you go back to thinking about those one library models where everybody's working as a team, that should result in a difference in communication, because people should feel that they are quite confident to answer any questions and they know who they're going to go to ask the next question.
Absolutely. Well tied in, Susan. Thank you very much again. That was a great presentation, and we're really thrilled to have you join us as one of the QULOC University librarians, and looking forward to meeting with you in the future.
Yes, as soon as we can get to Brisbane.
Yes, indeed. 17th of December.
Right.
Okay, thanks, Susan. And we'll move on to the next presentation. So our next session is supporting Indigenous students and staff and respecting Indigenous knowledge. And I'll hand over to Caroline Williams, the University Librarian at the University of Queensland, to introduce the presenters. Thanks, Caroline.
Thanks, Sarah, and good afternoon, everyone. It seems that I can't put my video on. Oh, stop. Right, got it. Thank you. Hello. I'm going to introduce you in a moment to 5 presenters, but first I start by acknowledging the Turrbal and Yagara people, the traditional owners, and their custodianship of the lands on which I speak to you from today, and pay my respects to their ancestors and their descendants. So today I'm joined by 5 speakers. We have Maureen from Southern Cross University, who is the convener of the QULOC Indigenous Strategy Reference Group. I've got 2 colleagues from the UQ team. I've got Mia and Kathleen here as well. We've got Helen from James Cook University and Nicole Clark from QUT. Now we have a big subject, and I'm hoping that Kathleen can start sharing screen now with the presentation. Our topic is supporting Indigenous students and staff and respecting Indigenous knowledges. And we've got a roller coaster to take you through in our presentation, and also a Padlet to share with you so that you can start typing in your thoughts as we speak. So the Padlet link is coming up in chat now. So the ground that we're covering is we're taking the perspective from the QULOC Indigenous Strategy Reference Group. We're taking the national perspective, the core perspective, and then we're also taking individual perspectives, either from an institutional perspective or a personal perspective. Now, when we get to the end of our roller coaster of presentations, we're really hoping that there'll be something in this for everyone, that some of you will feel better informed, others will feel inspired to do more, and that you'll be really questioning your thinking and positioning on support for Indigenous students and staff, and indeed the way that we think of this as traditional librarians. So the next slide just points to the Padlet, and gives you the questions that we're hoping will help you navigate your thoughts and capture them for us today. So thinking about a day in your life, and where you might be having an impact and where you'd like to have an impact. The focus on what more you could do as an individual, and then also in your workplace more broadly. Okay, at which point we'll move to the next slide, and I'll hand over to Maureen to talk us through the amazing work of the Indigenous Strategy Reference Group. So Maureen, over to you.
Thanks, Caroline. I'm speaking to you from the Lismore campus of Southern Cross University on the land of the Widjabul Waible people of the Bundjalung Nation. I pay my respects to this land and her people and extend that respect to all Aboriginal, Torres Strait Islander and First Nations peoples present. Today, I'm here on behalf of the ISRG, the Indigenous Strategy Reference Group of QULOC. And for those of you unaware of ISRG, we started in 2017 and we're tasked to look at Universities Australia Indigenous strategy and consider how libraries can help to better support our Indigenous staff and students. Now, we quickly realized that ISRG wouldn't help anyone if approached as a box-ticking exercise, that ongoing deep listening, reflecting, and learning was necessary to transform into meaningful actions. The image shown here is of the ripples of change that our group has been striving towards. Earlier this year at the Call Indigenous Knowledges Symposium, we highlighted a few specific examples, and today my co-presenters will share some more. What I'd like to share is the journey ISRG has been on and continues to travel. Our group acknowledges that, like in the university sector as a whole, most of us are white. We are not representative of the group we are discussing. ISRG is incredibly fortunate to have wonderfully talented First Nations library staff members who bring a perspective and lens that others in the group might not understand or even be aware of. But all of us have unconscious bias and blind spots. But we need to be cognizant of our personal, professional, and institutional lenses. And then we can challenge the assumptions that come with our lens and be open to learning and changing. We can actively ensure that we are working together and make sure that the responsibility to educate the white folk and to action change is not falling to our First Nations staff. Instead, we must all take personal responsibility. In ISRG, we include a sharing circle as part of our meetings, operating with an ethos and mindset of improvement and shared learning. We take the time to discuss successes, failures, and plans. Nothing is too small to talk about, but it's equally okay to have nothing to say. We are not the experts, and so to expand our lens, we need to learn from outside our echo chamber. Where feasible, we do try to have guest speakers. However, we're also aware that it isn't fair to ask someone to come and talk to our group when we haven't done our own research. In libraries, I think we're all familiar with the trope of students wanting things explained to them when they haven't even tried themselves. Why would this be any different? Why should an expert come and talk to us when we haven't read their papers or watched recordings already available? Instead of asking people to repeat themselves, ISRG will often find a webinar to view as individuals, and then we'll come back and extend our learning through group discussion, because it's our responsibility to educate ourselves. This experience of shared learning creates a positive feedback loop within the group, and the excitement generated re-energizes us to continue the work that needs to be done within our institutions. And we have seen ripples of change in how collections are managed or displayed, in collaborative efforts unfolding, in culturally safer spaces created, in employment opportunities and advocacy for policy change. These changes are only possible through individual and institutional self-reflection. So the last thing I'd like to share with you today is an area of self-reflection that I struggle with, and that's my struggle to make sure that I'm using my position of privilege to amplify the voices of our Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander students, staff, and colleagues, instead of speaking for or instead of speaking instead of them. Understanding this balance is essential and comes back to having an awareness of my lens. Even though I don't personally experience the oppression found in libraries, doesn't mean it isn't real. I try to start with the assumption that my understanding is probably wrong, that I need to learn, and that libraries are not safe. But it is my responsibility to do something about it. And I challenge each and every one of you to accept that your understanding might be wrong and to learn and grow from that experience. With our reference group, we've created a safe space within our libraries for First Nations library staff, allies, and advocates to meet and share. So let's increase that safety beyond our small group. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Maureen. Thank you for everything that you've shared there and the openness with sharing your perspective and your journey, and also a huge thank you to Maureen for her contribution as convener of the ISRG in setting up such a way of working and really creating that environment where the group can feel safe in that sharing and their journey on their paths of understanding and reconciliation. So next we go to Helen, who's taking the national perspective and also sharing her experience and the contribution at JCU, both at a library level and a wider level on the path of reconciliation. So over to Helen.
Hello, everyone. I'd like to pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging of the Bindal people on whose lands our Bebegu Yamba campus lies, and the Wulgarugaba people of the Townsville region. So yes, there's a few things on this slide here, and the first one is about what's happening at the national level with CALL. And Maureen mentioned the Indigenous Knowledges Symposium that was held earlier this year. Now, I'm sure many of you attended. There was a survey that was done to follow up after that, and it basically came back showing overall that everyone was really satisfied with it and would actually like to see more events like this in the future. And the three main priorities that came out of that are what you see on the slide, and I won't read them out, and they're probably not a surprise to anybody. The good news is that there will be a CALL Indigenous Knowledges Advisory Group next year, which will include 4 Indigenous staff and 2 senior leaders on it, and a further Indigenous Knowledges Symposium for 2022. So that's something we can all look forward to. I did want to speak a little bit about the JCU library experience, and of course it's mixed up together with the wider JCU experience. And, you know, there's lots of good things. Everyone can come up with lots of good things. And one of them is that we've got a mature model of Indigenous library liaison that we've managed over 20 years at JCU, which is a great thing. With JCU's 50th in 2020, we were gifted Indigenous campus names now for all of our campuses. And this beautiful artwork you see there is also a commemorative print from our JCU's 50th birthday. We've also got a really good relationship with our Indigenous Education Research Centre and our PVC Indigenous Education and Strategy. He's a member of our Library Advisory Board. We consult with him on many projects. He works with us on things like our Mabo Interpretive Wall and 50 Treasures projects. And as a result of that, I've always also been invited to be a member of the JCU Indigenous Action Group, which was a privilege to be on. What we worked on initially that we've just finished is an Indigenous workforce strategy, and it's a refresh of the strategy, but it's a much better, more inclusive strategy that it identifies pathways for Indigenous employment around the domains of opportunity, creating an environment that's respectful of Indigenous culture and community. There's also, of course, things like Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander cultural models that are available to staff, and I'm sure this is the case at lots of other institutions. And we've got the privilege of being the Mabo Library, the Eddie Corky Mabo Library, and that gives us great scope to work with the Mabo family on lots and lots of ventures, which is fantastic. But a few of my staff, and I don't have time to mention them, wrote a paper this year on reconciliation in Australia, the academic library empowering the Indigenous community. And that gave me an opportunity to look at that and reflect and not think about just all these wonderful things, but where are we going from here and how can we reflect on this? And they're those items I've got there in red around incorporating diversity and inclusive principles in our documents, we've migrated to a new library services platform this year. It's given us that opportunity to really think carefully about the language that we use in any types of communications we have with our clients. We're certainly looking at providing more employment opportunities, and the new workforce strategy assists that. And also, although we consult with our students regularly through lots of types of surveys, we really don't directly target Indigenous student experience in any of that. So there's some of the things that we want to do. So I'll probably leave it there because I've gone over, but it's just to give you a quick overview of what's happening in this space.
Thanks. Thanks so much, Helen. And I can see that some of the things that you're mentioning as work going forward are appearing in our Padlet as well. So it's looking like that we've got some good opportunities to think about some of these things together and work together more on them. So that's great. Our next speaker is Kathleen, and Kathleen's going to share where we're at from a UQ perspective. And I think it's fair to say that the more thinking that we do, the more we realise we have to do. So with that, by way of introduction, I'll hand over to Kathleen.
Thanks, Caroline. And I too would like to pay my respects to the Turrbal and Yagara people as traditional owners of the land where I'm based, and pay my respects to their ancestors and descendants. So I'm going to talk about reconciliation action plans, or RAPs. And RAPs can be a great impetus to start the work that needs to be done. And for us here at UQ, it certainly has helped us get traction, to get funding, and to start some of the things that we had identified as needing to do. And Mia's going to speak about all the amazing work that, that she's leading a little bit later on, but it's brilliant impetus. And a RAP is really important because it really can draw attention to certain tangible goals. So I'm going to use space as an example here, and making welcoming physical spaces for our Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander staff and students. So in the UQ RAP, the goal around spaces is incorporate Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander values and spaces in the physical and built environment, which is really a great way to start thinking about space and start thinking about what you can do. But what a RAP might not do is encourage you to think about spaces at a deeper level. So when you go beyond the RAP, and you start to read and you start to look, and you read a piece such as one written by Bronwyn Fredericks, who's our PVC of Indigenous engagement here at UQ, which I will share the link to, you start to think more deeply about the whiteness of university spaces. And you realise you need to do more than meet the RAP goals. Because if you've ever been to a university campus, and particularly a sandstone university campus, the architecture, all the spaces, all the things that we highlight are predominantly Western, predominantly white. And if you've ever been in the UQ Senate room, it's a lot of white men on white men's portraits around the wall. So by exploring, by reading, by doing those things, the view of space shifts beyond the physical space goal that might be in the RAP. But really, when we talk about space, are we looking at that in more general? And are we actually starting to think about how welcoming are our spaces for community engagement? And hang on a second, how welcome are our spaces for library staff members? And even more, are we actually a welcoming profession? And that probably sounds like a really challenging question to throw out to a group of LIS professionals who I'm sure all have really good intentions. But there are times when we don't know what we don't know. And I'm certainly guilty of that. So does reading a RAP and meeting those goals tell us about things like where there are barriers in place that make it harder for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people to work in libraries and take up space? I want to reiterate that I think a RAP is a hugely important and wonderful first step, but it is just the first step. So with space as my RAP example, I hope I've shown that it's more about the RAP goal of physical spaces for students and staff. It's space in general, and having Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people take up space in our profession, which is why the RAP is the start of our thinking and the start of our work, not the end. So I would suggest that we all need to move beyond identifying the goals in our RAPs and start to identify and then meet our own goals as libraries. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Kathleen. Some real challenges there for us going forward, but I really like that, that phrase, take up space. We're moving now to Nicole, who's going to speak from her perspective on the path to reconciliation.
Thanks very much, and hi everyone. And I'd like to pay my respects to the Turrbal and Yagara people as the First Nations owners on the unceded land that I'm on, Meanjin and Brisbane, and pay my respects to their elders and extend my respect to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander colleagues here today. So I want to very quickly offer you 3 personal things that I found helpful to challenge the things that, as Kathleen says, things that I don't know. So this is my way of trying to find the things I don't know and challenge them. And some of these echo the things that Maureen and Kathleen have said too. So thank you both. Firstly, listen to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander colleagues and students about what they want from us. How can we support their priorities? My grandmother, who was a smart woman, used to say, you have 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason. So let's really listen more and let's talk much less. Secondly, read the Uluru Statement from the Heart today if you haven't read it already. And if you've already read it, read it again and watch the video that accompanies it. It's truly one of the most powerful, generous, considered documents I've ever read. I think the 3 concepts of voice, treaty, truth will help us in our personal lives move forward as a nation, but they'll also help us as an excellent guide in our working lives. Am I listening to and privileging Indigenous voices? Am I recognising Indigenous sovereignty and self-determination in the work I'm doing and the work I'm doing with Indigenous people? Am I telling the truth? Am I facilitating the truth to be told? And lastly, and this is one of the hardest ones because we all know it's easier to see the blind spots of others than it is to see our own. But think about, as Kathleen said, what it means to be a space, what it means to be a library. Think about the cultural privilege and the cultural bias that we have imbued in this place, because just like any other institution, we have it. We may think we're neutral, but there are cultural and value judgments at play in our work. And so this really hit home for me in 2 ways recently. One in another context, when I watched the film Change the Subject about a group of students in the US who lobbied Dartmouth Library and then the Library of Congress to have the term illegal immigrant removed from the Library of Congress subject headings. So if I wore pearls, I'd clutch them now. The library catalogue. Do you hear me? That's where they were getting them changed. That really challenged me. I found that very difficult. And then last week, we were fortunate to have Professor Chelsea Watego launch her book, Another Day in the Colony. And she spoke about whiteness and about the whiteness of places and the whiteness of libraries and how we really need to truly privilege and celebrate Indigenous perspectives in the same ways that we privilege and celebrate white perspectives. So they're things that I've found useful. Thank you.
Thank you, Nicole. Very, very powerful statements there that speak to our hearts and our minds and really challenge us. Thank you for that. I'm now going to hand over to Mia, who's going to share her lived experience. So over to you, Mia.
Thank you, Caroline. Everyone can hear? Yep, perfect, cool. My name's Mia Strazik-Barker, so I'm a proud Uralwarai Gamilaroi woman from Lightning Ridge in northwest New South Wales. And I as well would like to pay my respects to elders past and present and acknowledge that I'm on Turrbal and Yagara land and that it always was and always will be Aboriginal land. So I'm going to quickly talk about my lived experience. And basically, I've come from the non-for-profit sector, particularly working with Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander organisations, communities and peoples. And instead of approaching the role in a traditional sense and placing a barrier to employment with strict qualifications needed to work within a library, it was important to see the transferable skills that I had and could carry across, which also included my lived experience as a Blackfellow in this place. And the other skills that I brought along as well was my community engagement, development skills, as well as project and program management to tackle UQ Libraries Reconciliation Action Plan manager role. And then this also speaks to the lay of the land. So from conversations within Queensland, we know employment of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples, particularly in an academic library, is extremely low. And if mob are working in this industry, they tend to be placed in public libraries where it is seen as more welcoming and safer. I know from my experience at UQ, no matter how supportive and lovely the team and staff around you may be, it's still isolating being the only Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander staff member, which is why it's so important to recognise and allow these staff members the opportunity to connect with wider Indigenous staff networks or community groups outside of the library that continue to fill their cup and helps them navigate this difficult landscape. So I've been with UQ Library now since July 2021, and not surprising was uncovering the amount of work to do. So the work sat under UQ's overall reconciliation action plan and picking apart deliverables where the library could contribute. From a broad and high overview level, we have chosen 13 projects to undertake, which could mean in itself that, you know, UQ Library could have a wrap of their own. The danger with reconciliation action plans, though, is organisations becoming too prescriptive in terms of deliverables and rigid with their approaches to ticking boxes and seeing something as accomplished. And what we know is with these projects and the work, it extends beyond the length of a reconciliation action plan strategy and where possible needs to become core business. So I guess confident in my skills of community engagement and development along with program and project management, I don't forget my place and the best practice of leveraging wider lived experience and formal qualifications within the sector. So this is why it's so important for me to build relationships with MOB to share their lived experience and provide informal mentoring and teaching. And it's always important to preference First Nation voices. And I've looked to the research, presentations and conversations of individuals within the Indigenous Archives Collective as an example. I also recognise the value and expertise that my non-Indigenous colleagues provide every day in UQ Library and leverage these. So we've organised for individuals to come on the journey with me and my work through a formal volunteering process. This is important as the volunteers are exposed to further professional development opportunities and conversations that assist carrying the cultural load or burden that someone like myself feels. It moves to a collective responsibility and approach rather than the pressure I could and can feel to be a spokesperson for any Indigenous topic that someone feels like discussing or questioning in the workplace. Another piece in the puzzle of navigating my role in UQ Library has been the opportunity to learn some specific library skills through online training and attendance of webinars and wider sector presentations to increase my knowledge. So I've had the full support of UQ Library to complete 3 courses through the Australian Society of Archivists and have been approved for further opportunities next year. I've also loved the opportunity of joining the Indigenous Strategy Reference Group and meeting like-minded colleagues across academic libraries. I've particularly found this group so insightful and motivating in continuing my learning and providing a very safe discussion space. These groups are seen to me as business as usual or key to my understanding and delivering in my role, and also improve my sense of belonging in the industry. I think given the timing, I've touched on these points, and I think I hand back over to you, Caroline.
Yeah, thanks so much, Mia, for everything that you've shared just now, and the wonderful work that you're doing within UQ and the contribution that you're making to the QULOC group. Thank you so much for all of that. And what we plan to do, but have run out of time, is look at the Padlet. So I'm just going to take from the Padlet the comment that's got the most likes and share that with you. It's a powerful comment. Stop viewing engagement as an add-on to business as usual, acknowledging universities and libraries as part of the colonial project, and that real change will be significant and structural. Feels like a good comment to end this session on. And we've got another slide of references. And thank you to those of you who've been sharing other references either on the Padlet and chat. What I propose that we do is pull all this together and get it all out to you. And from there, I'm really hoping that we've inspired and engaged all of you as individuals, and in thinking about your contribution to supporting Indigenous students and staff. Okay, and And thank you to my wonderful panel members. We knew we had a lot we wanted to say. Thank you for being as succinct as you possibly could be. Thank you to Maureen, to Mia, to Kathleen, to Nicole and Helen. And I'd also like to thank another couple of staff who contributed to our thinking in getting this presentation together. So thank you to Yanti and Claire at JCU for their support as well. Thank you all. Back to you, Sarah.
Thanks, Caroline, and everyone who participated in that session. That was great. A lot of information. We will make sure that we get it all together. We'll be saving the chat transcript, and we'll pull together the slides as far as we can, and we'll make them all available on the QULOC website. So now moving on to our final presentation. The topic is supporting student success and wellbeing, how the library can contribute. And I'll hand over to Blanca Pisani, who's the Director of Library Services at the University of New England, to introduce the session. Thanks, Blanca.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. And good afternoon. There's quite a few people here. And I would like to also, on behalf of my UNE colleagues and the library, to pay our respect to the people of this land, the Aniwan people. And we recognize the strengths, resilience, and capacity of the Aboriginal community, and pay our respect to the elders past, present, and future. And our colleagues here today. Means the session that I'm presenting today is supporting students' success and well-being. And I've been working with Sarah on this session. And we thought that with all the changes that is happening in our organizations, there's been so many focus on student support and student services, and just to bring some external support and perspectives to our libraries. It is my great pleasure to present the two next speakers that are our leaders of UNE and also Bonn, which is great. Means I would like to introduce Professor Shelley Kanash, who is the Executive Principal Student Experience at UNE, and it is my great honor, and Shelley is our boss. Shelley has a big portfolio here at UNE, looking at all the student services. She leads the student engagement and retention, something that is so critical for all of us. And Shelley is a leading scholar in education technology, and she's very passionate about student experience, career, and employability. And because I know that we are a bit short of time, I'm going just to hand it to Shelley, just to see how Shelley sees the library role in supporting student success and well-being. Thank you, Shelley.
Thank you very much, Blanca and Sarah and all. It's my pleasure to be here today. And it's my absolute pleasure and honor that the library is a really key and integral part of student experience. And I think that that's a very wise decision, particularly when we look at student engagement. And so we've been toying with a new definition of student engagement. And so hot off the press, I thought I'd share that with you here today. So at UNE, our new definition of student engagement is a set of cohesive strategies enabling learners to make their mark on the world and the connected university experience to make its mark on our students. So it's that two-way interaction, so that we're really inviting our students to engage, so that it's not only about what comes after university, but to really let go and be part of that student experience and truly engage. And at the same time, be co-contributors and actively involve citizen scholars in their own experience, so that they can go forward and as graduates make a mark on the world. So when we're looking at it then in the context of student experience, what supports do students need in order to fully engage? And this is, of course, a very critical question now with COVID and in our various stages of the pandemic. And then here at UNE, on top of that, we've recently had an extreme weather emergency event with a tornado on top of the pandemic experiences. So our students, there's especially our vulnerable students, are really struggling. And so when we look at, I love the works of Sarah O'Shea and colleagues, where she reminds us to really privilege the experiences and keep our lens always on our students who have more equity considerations, and to take a look at how the experiences particularly are for them. So I'd like to tell you about two initiatives that we're running right now. And one is around the HAP, so Higher Education Participation and Partnership. And this year the HAP criteria is for Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander students, students from families with low socioeconomic status by postcode, and regional or remote students by postcode, which accounts for a very high percentage of our students here at UNE, particularly online. So what we did is we've run direct bursary applications with a really simple application. So we've reached out to all of our HAP eligible students and offered $1,500 bursaries if they're COVID affected. And truly, who isn't COVID affected. And one of the things that this has done for us, I just did a thematic analysis on the many, many applications that we received back to see what is the data telling us about where our students are struggling and where they need our supports. And so the top two categories were work-related, students who are being made redundant, given reduced hours, their businesses failing, etc., which is really critical now that we're all having in our universities more and more mature age students who are working while they're studying. And the second is dependent related matters. So single mothers caring for multiple children while studying, needing to homeschool while you're studying, etc. So these are the kinds of supports that our students are particularly needing at these times. So how can the library contribute? The first way, I love the metaphor of being a Medina. So I was very lucky when travel was still possible, and hopefully one day it will be again. When I finished I just started my undergraduate degree, and a girlfriend of mine said, I'm going backpacking in Europe. And I said, oh, I finished one semester of my undergraduate degree. I'm coming with you. I'm going to take a delayed gap and wait. And one of the places, we left Europe and went to Morocco, and loved Morocco. And one of the experiences that we loved the most were the markets of the Medina, the meeting place. And it wasn't just the fact that it was a market, but that it was an opportunity for people to come together and share and connect. And so to the library, not just that it's a housing place for books, traditional concepts of libraries, but very much a Medina, the meeting place. And that is online and on campus. The second point is to enable a connected up experience online and on campus. I have a theory, it will be interesting, or my hypothesis is that people are going to more and more come together. Now that we're reaching this next stage of the pandemic, I think people are hungry for connection, for being back together, for engaging with one another, for interacting. They're lonely and isolated, and I can definitely feel it. So my family's in, my husband's in Queensland. For a while, we were in 4 different states, and the border slammed shut, and here I am in New South Wales. So I haven't seen my husband for over 4 months, and I haven't seen my son or daughter for well over a year. So I'm definitely hungry for connection. And I think that that's one of the places that the library can really purposely, explicitly, intentionally bring people back together. And the third point is to remember that retention is not a number, it's a person. And we need to stay with studies and for students to stay with their studies, They need support, not only the academic supports and supports around their studies, but they need supports around their health, their family, their work, and their finances. And the library can play a part in all of that. One quick example before I turn off my turn back on my mute button is that we're running a UNE student engagement strategy, and Blanca, as university librarian, is a really key part of this. So we're using the VFAIR platform, which is, if you haven't taken a look at it, have a look. It's, if you think about a fair, a job fair, for example, where there's booths and a speaker center, etc. It looks like that, but it's online. So we're going to have a call and tap students, academics, and community members and employers on the shoulder to take up booths, be exhibitors and visitors, and about their passion projects. What do you care about? Is it about climate change? Is it about animal husbandry? Is it about fiscal responsibility? And to pitch their ideas to one another. And then we're going to join them up and have communities of practice all through 2022 so that students are truly engaging and being part of the change that they want to see. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Shelley, for your enthusiasm and support to us. And my next, the next presenter, have the honor to present Kerry Valentine. Very nice to meet you, Kerry. And Kerry is the Director of Student Success and Wellbeing at Bond University. And Kerry leads a suite of diverse services and innovation services to deliver an exceptional student experience with a focus on retention, employability, and personalized support for student success. The Student Success and Wellbeing team incorporates counseling, disability, campus nurse, the Indigenous Center, Academic Skills Center, Career Development Center, and the largest part that is the Bond University Library. Thank you, Kerry, for being here today too.
Thank you, Blanca. Thanks very much. If I could ask you all to bear with me, I would like to just share my screen because I would like to present a few things. So I wanted to start by just saying that the role I am in is new to Bond. I began the last day of March, and as a new role, it had a lot of back-end preparation in terms of what people hoped it could do and would do. But with any new role, it's really all about how you interpret it once you commence and how you see it growing and evolving. And so resiliency has been probably the cornerstone of this role and all of the team who work with me, because we're all, finding our way in this space. When I looked at this job and it was being advertised, I thought it looked just sensational because of the teams that were involved and the opportunity it presented. But I also wondered, why does Bond need this? Because from a distance, I was very seduced by the fact that, yeah, we're running 16 years in a row of #1 in student experience in Australia. And that sounds like they pretty much got it sussed. So I couldn't figure out what do they want? What are they looking for? And it took, so my first few months were really discovering what it is we were hoping for. And it's not oversharing. I think we're giving away state secrets to say that, we have a small student cohort. We have a high staff student ratio. So we've been pretty fortunate in our ability to provide a lot of face-to-face and one-on-one provision. And of course, that will subsequently lead to higher levels of student satisfaction. And so we were lucky to continue to achieve this, but in today's multimodal version, that's not necessarily a sustainable model. So we had to look at something that would help us to continue outreach, but maybe in a different way. And we started by looking at our various working areas and saying, well, what are the refinements we can make and what are the areas we can consider for growth? And of course, we also had to declare ourselves as a team, because we were new, and we had to say, we're here to help not just students, but staff. And that probably was our bigger sell, was the onward sell to staff, because we had fully functional areas already going. And, people knew about the library. The students certainly knew about the library. The students knew about our Niumbul, our Indigenous Center. And indeed, we're so fortunate. We have a really high number of students in that and a really high success rate of conversion and completion. So we're pretty happy with that. We've got our medical center, counselors are busy. It's all going on. The students know we're here and it's really busy. So we needed to say we're all that and more. And we also needed to say that to the staff. So what we did to start was, as a team, we got together and we said, let's look at how we can present ourselves a little bit better to the staff and present a clear and unique message to the staff, distinct from the students. Because we all know that any service has to commence with a recommendation or a referral. And if the staff aren't aware of all of the things you can do, it's impossible for them to refer onward. So what we did was we created our SharePoint site, which it took a little bit of time, I won't lie. It took a little bit of nudging and prodding because not everybody was big on the concept initially. But I can safely say that after just a few months of operation, where we are one of the most popular sites in the SharePoint spectrum on our university, and it has become a real go-to space for staff. And so we're pretty happy with that. And we continue to build it. So I'm just going to run, it's a very quick walkthrough of how it operates. So our landing page here changes depending on the urgent message of the day. And yes, we are running the National Student Survey. We're running it uniquely late because of our semester system. So if you're wondering why is that appearing there, it's because, yes, it's live right now for us. And we wanted to make everyone really comfortable with all of these things. And you can see across the top, we've represented each of our functional areas here, and we have revisited our content on the website and on the student sites and really directed it to staff and said, how can we help staff? Some of the new content that we added in is, sits here in essential information and resources, and this grows on a regular basis. So we're looking at the new things that came out of Headspace and University Australia on supporting circumstance students. We have simple things like working with children blue cards. We added this content that was not really in existence previously, the LGBTIQ support staff for staff and students. It's a shared thing, but this is all new to them. So we wanted to make sure we had a really relevant landing page for them that helps them manage where if they belong to this community, if they want to be an ally, if they encounter students, and how to just understand how it works a little better. We also added international student support simply because to date, it has been more about visas and things. So we really wanted to add a little more in the well-being space here. Hence, we've got quite a good reference back to BUPA, our preferred overseas health provider. And here we have the lovely library page. And what's really important is that they've split it up into some great working areas where we can see what they wanted to communicate to staff. So they wanted them to understand there are services here for so many things. And honestly, I think people just weren't aware of just how busy these amazing people are. So I just thought I'd start by sharing that with you. And I wanted to also share with you the fact that, when I started, and I was obviously very new, I was very surprised that I was introducing staff to each other at our first meeting. And I thought, wow, how does that happen that, you don't know each other? I've only been here a week and I know all of you. And what transpired was quite simply that we didn't have that connection. We didn't have a chance. And it wasn't just the library, it was across the board. People just weren't being given the opportunities to connect. So what we have done is we've really looked at our professional development reviews, embedding basic KPOs that are trying to enshrine the concept of collaboration amongst our team members. And they're working on projects. Sarah now is heading up a project for a micro-credential, working with our Academic Skills Center that's focusing on postgraduate return to study and how we can support them better. We had a kindness week a few weeks ago, and the library was front and center, had a sold out session where they created flower posies, which was amazing, and everybody came to that. And everybody on my team had a stake in that week and sharing some area of expertise or specialization or just some kindness generally. And it was a huge success, and it really brought us front and center in the minds of so many here on the campus. So events like that are really helpful in terms of, you know, how we want to view ourselves and how we want to communicate our new mission. So really, for us, it was about sharing as much as possible what we really hope to do as a unit. Thank you. And that's really all from me. I just really wanted to address how we've been working together as a unit and the different things that we put in place. Simple things to start with, as simple as updating our websites and our iLearn pages, but always rebranding now, because it is about rebranding because we're new. And we want to make sure everyone sees this as a fully functional unit. And they know that if they go to the library, they can find out more about our other functioning areas and likewise. And honestly, I can't say enough about the fantastic work that Sarah and her team have done to really embed themselves as part of our culture. And it's so essential. Without that largest functioning part, it just couldn't happen. So that's it.
Thank you very much, Kerry, for your insight and your time here. I just probably didn't want to take some more of your time because we were short of time, but I was thinking that Shelley and yourselves shared something very similar, because these are new areas for us too, a new division that Shelley is leading, and probably Shelley has been here for only 4 months. In this, and maybe with similar experiences about learning about all of us and what we do, and I'm meeting all of that. Means from my part, I just would like to thank you both for your time and your generosity today to share your views about the libraries, and we are very grateful for that. Thank you.
Thanks, Blanca. That was another great session. So we're coming to the end now. Yeah, I guess I'd just like to reiterate, thank you very much to our wonderful presenters and facilitators. I've certainly got a lot of ideas out of it, and I think we can take some of them up and discuss them further in our next QULOC University Librarians meeting, which will be early next year. And I'd now like to hand over to Chelsea Harper, who's the incoming convener for QULOC to wrap up the event. Thanks, Chelsea.
Thank you. And I've been trying to think of how do we condense everything that we've consumed today and apply it to 2022. So I'm going to make an attempt. In 2022, let's use our librarian superpowers to empower through partnership. Let's engage in risk-taking and deliver targeted and aligned solutions. Let's think beyond our assumptions of what students want and be reflective and collaborative. Let's challenge received ways of knowing and doing and aspire to equity for all students. Let's celebrate Indigenous perspectives and listen deeply to lived experience. Let's continue to engage and connect, but let's seek deeper and more meaningful engagement. So again, I just want to echo Sarah's thanks to the presenters for today, and also thanks to all of the attendees. Thank you for your time and for connecting and engaging with our presentations today. And also, I would like to take this opportunity to express on behalf of QULOC my sincere thanks and appreciation to Sarah Fredline, who's been our QULOC convener for the past 2 years. And I don't think she could have chosen a more difficult 2-year period to take on that role. Very challenging to be a university librarian and a QULOC convener over the 2020 and 2021. Thank you, Sarah, and thank you, Sue Hartley, for everything that you've done for QULOC over the past 2 years. And I'd invite the presenters to provide a virtual round of applause if you can, and if you'd like to share your thanks in the chat, please do so. With that, I'd like to close the 2021 QULOC University Librarians Forum and wish you all a restful holiday season. And I look forward to greeting you in 2022, rested, rejuvenated, and ready to reconnect. Thank you, everybody.